I'm Ginger Bowden, and we're going to be spending 6 weeks together looking at the books of Ephesians and Colossians and what they have to teach us about Jesus and about our church. Hope you'll join us. We're in week 2 of our look at Ephesians and Colossians, and today we're going to talk about when did God start planning that our salvation would be through Jesus' sacrifice. Let's jump right into the first chapter of Ephesians. In Ephesians 1, 4 and 5, it says, "Even before he made the world, God loved us and chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure." God chose, even before he had started creating our world, he chose that he would have a holy people. Initially, he chose the nation of Israel. Now, this wasn't because Israel was extra good or anything like that. This was God's choice to have a people that he called out that were separate and holy, and to whom he gave a set of rules and a standard that would elevate them from other cultures in the world. And it's the same for us. God has decided, not because we're so holy, but because we're so needy, that he would provide the way of salvation through Jesus. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 3, we read, "All of us used to live that way, following the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. By our very nature, we were subject to God's anger, just like everyone else." Now, I want to notice here that Paul says all of us. He's including himself in this. He is part of it, even though he's a teacher, an apostle, even though in some letters he will say, you can use my life as an example as I'm struggling to live my faith. But he's very much including himself as one, just like the other members of the church. He's also including both Jews and Gentiles. So in their time and in those Hellenized cities, there would be people who were Jewish by birth and by faith. There would be people who were not Jewish by birth but had studied the Jewish faith and were adhering to it to some degree. We call those Hellenized Jews. And then there were people who probably had no real interaction with the Jewish faith at all, maybe just a really surface level. But Paul is saying all of us, Jews, Gentiles, and whatever. The Jews had the law, the 10 Commandments, the Torah, the Old Testament. The Jews had the law to show them how sinful they were, how hard it was to keep the law. But the Gentiles, even though they didn't have the Torah to adhere to, it's the same for us. We know that by our nature, we are sinful. We choose to do things that are outside of God's will. And that's our nature. Let's move over to the first chapter of Colossians. Now here, Paul is more poetic in how he says it. This is Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 17. "Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. For through him God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see, such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through him and for him. He existed before everything else, and he holds all of creation together." In Genesis, that Paul's readers might have been familiar with, it says that God created Adam in his image. Adam was created like a picture. He was a created being, but we're created in God's image. Paul wants to be really clear here that Jesus is not a created being. Jesus is God. He's not created like us. And when we saw Jesus in the flesh, when he was seen, we were seeing God, seeing what had been unseen up to that point. It's an important point that we accept now, but people really needed to be taught. It had to be called out. Jesus is God. He has existed forever. It was a heresy going around at the time and into the future that Jesus wasn't really God, that he became God on the cross, that he was really just a man. And Paul was combating that right away. Jesus is God. One of the other lines I like is at the end where it says, "He holds all creation together." Some translations say, in Jesus, all things line up. And I love that language. It's in Jesus that everything lines up, everything makes sense. It's in him, God come to earth, the visible presence of what had been invisible, that everything in the world lines up. We're going to look at that poetic language. It goes on a little bit further. We're going to look at that together as a group and find what it means for us as a church living out Christ's mission today.